Hello again, everyone. I have a little bit of a gardening vlog type video for you today. We finally have a break from all of the rain and the snow and the sub-zero temps. It's about 57 degrees today, so I'm taking advantage, even though it's a windy day, in getting some well-needed gardening chores done. So far today, I've been taking off the last of the frost blankets that I had down for those really cold temperatures. I have some hyacinth bulbs that were coming up already, mainly due to a warm streak we had in December. So I just wanted to protect the tops of those, so I mulched heavily over top of them and laid down a frost blanket. But I have noticed the rabbits have found them, so I may have to put a lightweight cover back on them. I've also been pulling back out some of my container plants, my fig tree, my button bush, and some strawberries that are usually fine in a sheltered spot over the winter, but because we had unseasonably cold weather, I decided to put them in my shed, so they're now coming back out. I also decided to go ahead and give those containers a little bit of water. As a rule, I don't water anything outside during the winter. We get enough rain and snowfall, but because these containers are in a sheltered spot, I usually will water them maybe 2 or 3 times just to make sure that they're having adequate moisture. So on my to-do list for the rest of the day is I need to check on the plants in my cold frame and probably give them a little bit of water since they're covered. I also need to check on my irrigation lines to make sure there was no damage. I'm also going to be flipping my compost piles, and I have a big bag of fruit and veggie scraps that are getting pretty stinky that I need to add to them as well. I'm also going to be planting some ginger for the very first time. I am super excited about this. I love ginger. I love making homemade ginger ale, and I've just never seemed to have gotten around to planting ginger. So I went to another first, Trader Joe's, for the first time, and I found some pretty good looking organic ginger. So I'm going to plant this in a pot today because ginger requires a pretty long growing season to get a good harvest, so more about that in a minute. Here are my cold frames. I have spinach on this side and bok choy and spinach on this side. And it's actually pretty warm in here today, so I think I'm going to prop them open just while the weather's a little bit warmer. So I don't have water hooked up to this bed, and I've just been using a grow oya to water all of the spinach, and it probably needs a little bit more water added. Yep. Now the bok choy has had an issue with aphids, so it's a good thing in that it tells me the cold frame is keeping the heat in, otherwise they wouldn't be able to survive, but bad because they don't have any of those natural predators like the ladybugs and the lacewings in this enclosed area or this time of year to keep them off. So I recently treated with some organic insecticidal soap, and that seems to have gotten most of them, but now that it's warmed up, I'm going to bring a hose out and spray these off probably later this week. So I don't always treat for aphids, especially in the summer. I rely on beneficial insects to keep them in check, or I just spray them off with a strong stream of water. But since I don't have access to either of those right now, then I will choose something like an organic insecticide. Sorry, I know this lighting is absolutely awful, but this is the backflow preventer on my irrigation line, and back in November I noticed the plastic cap had cracked. Now I won't know the extent of the damage until we test it out in the spring, but I'm trying out a backflow preventer insulated cover this winter to hopefully prevent any more damage. So here's what the cover looks like on. It is waterproof and it's pretty thick, and there is Velcro along the bottom to secure it. So I've had this on since I noticed the damage back in November, and so far it seems like it's doing a good job of preventing any more damage. I know there's more sizes and colors, so I'll link it in the description box below if you're interested. The wind is picking up like crazy. That's why the hair looks a mess and I'm in this tight little spot. But the last thing I need to do is to flip my compost piles. Now, for the rule over the winter, I just let these piles go cold. I will add to them from time to time and flip them maybe once every 2 weeks. I just usually don't want to fool with coming out in the winter when it's freezing and maintaining hot compost piles. So I have, like I said, a big box of really stinky fruit and vegetable scraps that need to go in this compost pile. I also have some rotting pumpkins that I just stuck to the side of the compost bins that I also need to put in. So a few quick tips to keeping pests out of your compost piles in the winter. And I speak from experience of what happens when you don't do this, because even with completely enclosed bins like mine with the lid and with the chicken wire, or actually I think this is hardwire cloth, pests can still find their way in. So if you can keep the material wet, and also make sure that you bury any food scraps into the center of the pile, that will deter any pests because they can't smell that food buried that deep and they don't like wet material to nest in. They like nice, dry, warm material. So if you can keep the material wet and bury the food scraps, that'll help deter a lot of those little furry friends from making homes inside your compost bins. So last thing to do is to pot up this ginger. Now I have knowledge in theory of how to grow ginger, but I've never actually done it. So I'm not going to claim to be an expert, but I'll just tell you what I know and how I will be planting it. So the first thing to do is to buy your ginger root or to grow your own if you're replanting it. Like I said, I bought organic ginger root because that was the only option that was available. I don't know that you necessarily need to have organic ginger root to grow it successfully. You do want to look for roots that are very firm. You don't want a lot of shriveling because that means they're really dried out. And then you want to look for pieces that have these little growth points on them. So if you can see this little pointy part right here, that's where you're going to get some growth from. And this one has multiple growth points. It looks like this one actually, I don't know if you can see, is starting to sprout, which is a good sign. Now, as far as choosing a container, because ginger root will grow more lateral than it will deep, you want to choose a pot that is more wide than it is deep. So you want to plant it sideways, not down. So sideways like this. And I'm going to go ahead and plant both of these in one container just to save space, and as they root and grow, then I will transplant one into another pot. I forgot to mention the reason that I'm planting this heat-loving plant in January, and that's because ginger requires a really long growing season to get a substantial harvest. So by starting this inside, I'm going to give it a few months head start. Now I'm in zone 6B and I have a pretty long growing season, but this will allow me to be able to get some shoots, and then I can divide them, put them in 2 separate pots, and then put them outside come May, where they will enjoy that warm environment. So hopefully they can get about 9, maybe 10 months of growing before I do a harvest. Thanks so much for joining me today as I got a few gardening chores done. Again, I will link that backflow preventer cover below if you're interested in checking that out. I'm also going to link my other social media accounts where I post quick, easy to follow videos aimed at helping beginner gardeners. Now I'm going to go enjoy this super nice weather just a little bit longer, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.